for your patience with the recent flooding events. It's been difficult for people to get around. We thank you all for showing up this morning. We know it was not easy, and we do appreciate you. Like I said, my name is Carmen Gores. I'm with Washington Trust Bank. I'm a small business banker. And I'm here also as part of the Kent Chamber Government Affairs Committee as our current chair. Legislation is an important part of what we do to support our business community in helping you survive and thrive and prosper. And on behalf of the coalition, it's my privilege to welcome our elected officials, community leaders, and the business owners who drive our regional economy. Together, this coalition represents more than 3,200 businesses that employ over 185,000 people, generating more than $100 billion in economic activity. And that's not just a statistic. It's payroll, it's families, it's innovation, and it's opportunity. This room reflects the strength of our region, especially those here this morning, and it's an important partnership between public and private sectors. Our businesses are deeply invested in the success of Washington State, and we believe thoughtful policy is essential to sustaining that success. I know I have business owners in the room who have been evacuated. They're concerned about their business location, about their employees. People were sent home early yesterday, and that's because we deeply care and have deep investments. It doesn't change the fact of what we are and who we are. But our growth cannot be sustained if businesses, especially small businesses, are overburdened by rising taxes, increasing regulation, and unpredictable costs. When businesses struggle, jobs stall, wages stagnate, and communities truly feel it. I know we all have a friend or family member or coworker who is dealing with something today that was unexpected last week. Today's conversation is an opportunity to listen, collaborate, and focus on practical solutions that strengthen our region for the long term. So we appreciate your participation, and we look forward to hearing feedback from our business community as well as our elected leaders. And so I want to thank those in the room that are our elected officials. I think I gathered everyone's name. I say this every time, but it never happens. We're gonna hold our applause until the end. If you feel the need, just one clap and done, right? Not two, just one. We can do it. So from our host city, the city of Auburn, and you can feel free to stand or raise your hand so we can see you in the room. Mayor Nancy Backus, Council Member, didn't we just have this conversation? And I see you. I see you. Council Member Yolanda Trott-Manuel, I didn't see her this morning come in. Did she here? Council Member Hanan Amer, got it right, there you go. Kate Baldwin, Council Member Kate Baldwin, I didn't see her come in. Sam, help me here. Okay, from the city of Kent, we have Council President Satwinder Carr. Very thank you. From our city of Renton, we have Council Member Jason Alberson. LBJ. We're gonna be family today. That's all right. And I didn't see Council Member Ryan McGurven. There you go, thank you. They're back there. From, one clap, there you go. From Covington, I didn't see Mayor Jeff Wagner. He may be handling other business. From our King County Council, Stephanie Fain, Councilmember Stephanie Fain, there you go. Pierce County Council, Dave Morrell. Oh, just for there. I haven't seen these others on here, but these are who's registered. We have our State Senator Victoria Hunt, Senator Bob Hasagawa, Secretary of State Steve Hobbs, and Port of Seattle Commissioner Sam Cho. Now we can do a round of applause for all of our elected officials. And so now I welcome to the stage our lobbyist, Carolyn Logue, who will do the next introductions. Carolyn.
Thank you. So I have I'm your lobbyist, and I had the quickest trip up here from Olympia that I've ever had, so it was awesome. So I'm just going to tell everyone in Olympia it's always flooded up here because nobody was coming. So I get the honor of introducing our keynote speaker. I was looking at how to introduce him, and I sort of was chuckling over there's actually instructions. So I was supposed to keep my remarks short. All right. I'm not supposed to read from the About page on the AGO website, so I went to Wikipedia. And then I learned there's another Nick Brown. And the only way I knew that it wasn't the right Nick Brown, there's an MP who is not that great from England, that Nick Brown wasn't on Survivor. And so I said, that can't be the right guy. So I went and looked up some more information. And it said to also personalize it, so I'm going to make it all about me. I've met him a few times. And I'm supposed to tailor the introduction to my audience. And I thought, okay, well, he comes from Steilacoom, Washington, which is part of the greater South Sound region, which is awesome. But seriously, I think it's my pleasure to introduce the 19th Attorney General of Washington State, Nick Brown, a graduate of Harvard Law, who was who's a former JAG, a Bronze Star recipient. He served as the lead counsel for Governor Jay Inslee, which I actually think is probably the first time I ever met him was back then. And then also as the U.S. Attorney for the Western District under Joe Biden. He's very committed to public safety, very committed to advancing environmental and worker protection causes and standing up for civil rights. So please join me in welcoming our Attorney General, Nick Brown.
First of all, let me just thank you for the introduction, and I appreciate the reference to my hometown of Steilacoom, Washington. I am a proud South Sound native and always try to represent my small community, which is the oldest town in the state of Washington, school district number 1. So well before Harvard Law School, I am a proud product of Steilacoom Public Schools from 2nd grade through high school, and I always try to champion that. And it's also, despite the fact that it was 25 years ago that I appeared on Survivor, it still comes up almost every time I speak, which I don't mind at all. The fact that they're now on season 50 about to start, and I was on season 2, makes me feel quite old. But I too look young, like our MC for this morning. I really just do appreciate the opportunity to be here and address all of you and acknowledge, like other folks have mentioned, some of the tragedies that we're facing all around us and the impact on our communities and families and businesses in this area. And we have a lot of work ahead of us. So I appreciate the time that people have come to be here, and certainly our thoughts are with all those struggling families. Unlike Boeing, I don't have $500,000 to donate to the relief effort, but our agency is busy right now with some of the flood support, given all of the client support that we do for the Washington state agencies that are helping with the recovery, and wish them Godspeed. I always like to start when I'm addressing an audience by acknowledging how much fun I'm having being Attorney General. At this time where there's a lot of stress and turmoil and chaos, I really could not imagine being in another position in another state right now. And the honor of serving as the 19th Attorney General of my home state, I will never take for granted. And also just want to acknowledge the tremendous public servants that I get to work with. A lot of people don't recognize that the AG's office is the 2nd largest law firm on the West Coast. We are second only to the California Attorney General's office. Believe it or not, I have 830 lawyers that work for me on behalf of Washingtonians, another over 900 staff in 13 offices across the state. And I see the dedication that all of these public servants do every day, and most of that work never gets any attention. Certainly the federal litigation, which I'll talk a little bit about, that's in the headlines a lot, drives a lot of our attention, but that represents really just a small fraction of the overall work that we do. And my role is to support all of our public agencies. We are somewhat unique in the fact that we represent every single state agency, board, and commission in the state of Washington, all of our public universities. Not every Attorney General has that responsibility, which is part of the reason that we are a fairly large office. But I like to say that we represent everybody from the Office of the Governor down to the Washington State Potato Commission, which, believe it or not, had a legal issue that I had to weigh in on not too long ago. But the scope and the breadth of the work that we do is tremendous. And I'm just so thankful to work with a dedicated staff of employees who are doing work on behalf of the public good, and understanding that public employment is often cast aside and derided and criticized. But I know that so many of the people that I work with could be doing other things for more money and less stress, and I'm just grateful to be part of this team. And I also treat my role as having an office of almost 2,000 people with a fairly large budget very seriously, and just the management capacity that I have to make sure that we are serving the state of Washington and its residents as best as possible. So we represent all of our agencies, but we also have a separate and independent voice to advocate on behalf of the people of the state of Washington. And I take that responsibility tremendously serious. Every time I sign my name onto a civil complaint, I know that I'm speaking for the 8 million Washingtonians, people that are paying attention to the work that we're doing and many that are not. And I don't take that responsibility on speaking on behalf of Washingtonians lightly. And there are so many things that we as an agency are focused on, from education to healthcare to environmental protections to worker safety to economic development. So much of what we do touches people's lives, and that's why I love my job, because every day I get to come to work and do things that matter, every day. And I recognize how important it is in this moment to lead with as much clarity and integrity and vision as possible, because we have tremendous challenges and opportunities to continue to try to make Washington State the best state in the country. And a lot of the work that we're doing impacts so many of the issues that you as business leaders and community leaders are facing. And I want to touch on some of those issues and highlight how we can continue to partner moving forward. But if you are left with one lasting thing from me today, I hope that it is that you understand that I am always an open door to talk to folks here and folks in the business community in general. We litigate a lot. I have a lot of litigation going on with Washington State businesses and some national businesses, but I don't view my job and my role as simply being a litigator. I view my job and the job of everybody that serves in the Attorney General's office as trying to solve problems. Litigation is a tool with which we solve problems, but it is by far the only tool that we have. And I want to make sure that people understand that I am always engaged and willing to have a dialogue with people about how we can solve problems, even if our interests don't always appear aligned. And so I hope that if you can continue to lean in and reach out to me and my team. I want to acknowledge my legislative director, Adam Eitman, who's here with me this morning, who has an easy job ahead in this session in the legislature with no important issues to address. But he and his team and our policy team and our division chiefs, I always want them to be accessible and available to you. And so I hope that you leave here with that lasting impression. But a lot of the work that we do that does not get as much attention involves things that impact you all. And first and foremost for me is our work around organized retail theft. And this is an issue that the AG's office has been tasked by the legislature and given support from the legislature to continue to try to invest in. Because although we have made tremendous progress in this space, we continue to be leading in categories around retail theft that we don't want to lead in. And my background, as you heard a little bit about, is mostly in the criminal justice system. I've served for many years as a prosecutor in the U.S. Army, as a prosecutor for the Department of Justice, and as the U.S. Attorney for 2 years prior to making this crazy run for public office. So my background is all about how we can continue to hold people accountable and try to make this community safe and use all of the tools that we need to try to advance public safety in this state. But we, as an Attorney General's office, do not have that much original criminal jurisdiction. Our work in the criminal justice space comes exclusively when county prosecutors ask us for assistance or when the governor asks us to take on a case. Otherwise, we don't really have very much original jurisdiction. But in the organized retail theft space, we have really worked in partnership with law enforcement investigators and prosecutors, mostly in the Puget Sound area, but now operating all across the state to continue to try to make sure that we are using our tools as a statewide agency to hold people accountable when they're damaging Washington businesses. I met last week with the task force to talk about ways that we can continue to partner. We continue to increase the number of cases that we are taking in the office and in that division. I get frequent calls from one of my predecessors, AG, then Governor Gregoire, who continues to try to push our agency to take on more cases. And I'm just really proud of some of the work that we've done in that agency. There are ongoing prosecutions now to make sure that we are advancing justice, but we're going to need more resources because this type of offense is not decreasing, and we want to make sure that we're advancing these cases to hold people accountable for their crimes as much as possible, because the sophistication with which they're operating has really, really increased. I also want to highlight that one of the issues that we're going to be asking our legislative partners, and the people that are here from the legislature already told me they're going to vote yes, so I appreciate that. But one of the issues that we're going to try to advance is giving our investigators more search warrant authority to work in partnership with our prosecutors and local prosecutors. Right now, we rely almost exclusively on a process that's fairly inefficient of having our search warrants executed by local agencies. We want to make sure that we have that authority so we can try to resolve some of these cases more quickly. We're also going to be asking the legislature to give us other tools to use our investigative authority, our civil investigative demands to continue to hold people accountable when they're harming Washingtonians. And this is going to be really important, I think, from our perspective, to try to advance the work that we're doing in this space. We also do a lot of work to make sure that we're holding people accountable when their business practices are anti-competitive. And our antitrust division is one of the leading divisions in the country in state AG practices, and has had tremendous success about making sure that businesses are operating on a level playing field. We joined 2 multi-state lawsuits recently against Google's digital advertising monopolies in search and display ads. Their market power really allows them to exact higher fees from advertisers while paying lower amounts for publishers for their ad space, which harms both large and small businesses who are just trying to reach their potential customers. And the antitrust division is going to be really looking for new substantive areas to make sure that we're making the business playing field as level as possible. But the work that most touches sort of your everyday average Washingtonians is our work to hold people and businesses accountable who are having misleading business practices and scamming Washington consumers, which I think damages not only those consumers, but damages everyone who's trying to operate fairly and cleanly in the business space in Washington. We try to protect these individuals and companies from misleading business practices to make sure that they are not being charged more and are getting what they're asking for. And we work really close in partnership with many other state agencies on this effort. We're also continuing our robust effort to track data breaches, which target businesses with sensitive consumer information more than any other sector of society. And we want to make sure that we enforce Washington laws against these sorts of data breaches. Ransomware attacks are a big source of these breaches, and in 2025, for the second straight year, we sent more individual notices of data breaches to consumers than there are in people in Washington, meaning we have residents who are experiencing multiple data breaches multiple times a year. But the work that obviously gets the most attention publicly is all of our federal litigation. And I can assure you that when I came into this office, it was not my hope and aspiration to be so involved in federal litigation. We just filed our 47th lawsuit against the president and the administration. And for a little bit of context, I think most people understand that my predecessor in this role, now Governor Ferguson, was not shy about suing the administration during the first Trump administration. But we were at literally three times the number of cases in 2025 than Washington State was in 2017. And from my perspective, that is a reflection of what I believe is just continual unlawful action by the administration. And I think in this time, in this country, we need to be having robust policy debates about the direction of this country. We need to make sure that we're disagreeing and trying to solve problems collectively. But my job is to make sure that despite those agreements, the people follow the law. And from my perspective, what the administration has been doing is in total disregard for congressional authority, for state sovereignty, for all sorts of programs that have been passed and authorized and funded by Congress. And they disagree with that, and they break the law in trying to harm Washingtonians and Washington agencies by changing the rules halfway through the game. And that is why we have been so involved in litigation thus far. And we have also successfully protected $15 billion in cuts to Washington. $15 billion. $15 billion in cuts to climate resiliency, which feels very timely in this moment. We brought a lawsuit just a few months ago to challenge an illegal change to how some climate resiliency programs were funded in the state of Washington, including protection for flood zones and many of our coastal communities that the administration illegally tried to cut. And I'm really proud that we won that lawsuit because not only of the tragedy that we're currently facing, but the ongoing challenges that we're going to have to face. But we've also protected money for public safety. We protected about $20 million that was passed by Congress through the Victims of Crime Act. It was actually originally authorized in the 1980s by that great woke and liberal champion Ronald Reagan, who authorized money for funding for domestic violence victims and human trafficking, and literally to pay the medical bills for people who suffer abuse. And that money was tried to be cut earlier this year until we fought and sued and protected $20 million to Washington State. We also fought and successfully protected about $150 million that was dedicated to school districts all across Washington State to make sure that we could best serve the next generation of leaders in this community. And without that litigation, almost every school district in Washington State would have been impacted. And so, when I talk about the work that we do federally, I want all of you to understand that my focus is on the impact on Washington. If there's something illegal and it harms Washington and we have a cause of action, we're going to litigate. If there's something illegal that doesn't impact Washington, we're not going to be involved. But if it's going to harm agencies and people or businesses here, we are going to be involved. And I said that we're 3 times as many cases as we were in 2017, but we're also about 10 or half a dozen cases less than some of my Democratic counterparts across the country. Because I pick and choose our cases very closely about, does it impact Washington? And do we agree with some of the legal theories that are being advanced? And if it impacts Washington, we're going to be engaged to make sure that we continue to protect things here in Washington. Lastly, let me just say that I view my job as to be the lawyer for the people of the state of Washington. Not every attorney general is separately elected. Some are appointed by their governor, some are appointed by their legislature. But in Washington, we have a separate constitutional officer, and I believe that is because of my unique role in trying to be the advocate for the people. And there are so many issues that we need to continue to lead on in the Attorney General's office to make sure that Washingtons have a safe and healthy and vibrant community to live in. And I will use that power to the best of my ability to make sure that we can continue to advance things that improve people's lives here. But this requires a partnership with so many people that are in this room, because I have a lot of great ideas about how we can do our work. But at the end of the day, our ability to do work relies on our ability to channel the needs of Washingtonians. And that includes our business community, includes the workers that you employ, and includes so many of the stakeholders across the state. So again, I hope that you continue to find a partnership in the AG's office, and I will continue to have as much damn fun as I can being your Attorney General. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. So I want to really quickly, because I know some of our legislators have some time commitments, so I want to bring up our legislators for a quick legislative panel. I want to bring up Senator Tina Orwall from the 33rd District, representing the Senate Democratic Caucus. They're also your own legislators, which is great. You have a lot of leadership in your legislators here. I want to bring up Senator Chris Gildon from the 25th Legislative District. He also happens to be representing the Senate Republican Caucus, also happens to be ranking on Ways and Means. I want to bring up Representative Chris Stearns from the 47th District, who I believe is one of our Assistant Speaker Pro Tems. Am I correct in that? Yeah, Speaker Pro Tem. I sometimes can't keep track, because we have a former Speaker Pro Tem. Thank you. And then finally, Representative, maybe not finally, lastly, Representative Drew Stokesbary from the 31st District, representing the House Republican Caucus as their minority leader. All right, so I told you I'd make this fun and easy for you all. God, Nick Brown's tall. Anyhow. So I thought I'd make it fun and easy, but we do want to kind of get a sense of how things are going to be going into the 26th legislative session. I've been told how horrible it's going to be, so I want each of you to confirm that. So anyhow, Senator Orwall, why don't we start with you? Just kind of a brief, what do you think from your perspective and your caucus's perspective, what are happening during the 26th?
It's been a heartbreaking week, and my top priority will be supporting the families and businesses impacted by the flooding. And I want to thank our mayors and our city council staff and all of you that have really helped out. It's going to be a difficult session. It is. We left and we found out pretty quickly that the budget was in trouble again. And we have a lot of needs in our community. We have a lot of families struggling, businesses struggling, and so I hope we can talk about that today. But it will be challenging. It's an important session to team up so we can get some good things done.
Senator Gildon?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having us here, Carol. This is an awesome event. I think certainly the budget is going to be forefront again this year. And if we just kind of do a little history lesson, a little bit of a recap, it was about December of last year that we were doing all of these pre-session forums, and there was talk about a budget shortfall, and then there was a lot of talk about, taxing the rich and a wealth tax and various ways to raise revenue to cover that shortfall. And in the end of the legislative session, there was about $12 billion of taxes that was passed, levied upon the people of Washington State, none of which really taxed the rich. Most of all of those taxes fell on the backs of business and ordinary citizens across the state. And then here we are again this December with the same discussion happening, that we've got a budget shortfall and there's a big push to tax the wealthy. We'll see how that works out. I'm not sure. Maybe there's enough horsepower in Olympia to get it through. But if I can forecast what's going to happen, because there is a budget shortfall, but the biggest part of the budget shortfall hits in 2026 and again in 2027. And if something like a wealth tax were to pass, it wouldn't take effect until about 2028. So that doesn't really solve the immediate budget shortfall. So I think what you're going to see is the legislature reach out, if they do pass additional revenue. I don't know that they will, but if they do, probably some of the old right now dollar type revenue packages, such as B&O tax, real estate excise tax, or sales tax, some of the things that they can grab right now, because that's where the bottom line problem lies. So I think that's where the fight's going to be.
Okay, Representative Stearns.
Thank you. I get like Senator Orwall. I just want to first start out by, recognizing how difficult things have been lately. I especially think of, what happened at Brown University, another shooting at Bondi Beach in Australia, another hate crime that has affected so many people. And at the same time, I'm so uplifted. I saw that Mayor Backus and Hanan, you guys were up all night at the Auburn shelter, just giving people hope. And that to me, that's our job as legislators. Someone once summed it up about my hero Bobby Kennedy, is that when he saw wrong, he tried to right it, and when he saw people suffering, he tried to heal them. And I think that's what I saw in action. So even though things are tough, and they will be tough in the next session, I also have faith in our own humanity, in our ability to care for one another. And that's you guys. You care so much about each other. So I'm grateful for that. In my role, I as my predecessor and mentor, Senator Orwall, she was Speaker of the town. We get to stand up there and sort of watch the whole thing unfold on the House floor. And the partisanship has increased. I think the temperature in the room has increased. But we also have the ability to work together. And as you guys probably know, most of the bills that we pass, they're bipartisan. So I think there's a lot of room for optimism in addition to just, the reality is it'll be tough. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Representative Stokesbary.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks, Carolyn and the South Central Chamber for having this breakfast in Auburn instead of like Tukwila or something. That makes my life a lot easier. And, you know, like my colleagues, definitely heart goes out to all the folks suffering from the flood issues. I woke up this morning, the city of Pacific is in the 31st district now. That's newish for us. And found out that at like 3 a.m. they had an evacuation order, and you know, so thanks not only to their city staff for doing that, but you know, they're a tiny town, and the city of Auburn is sending their own police officers out to Pacific to help with that. So you know, it's a team effort. Last night I was in a text message chain with my colleague. We call it the Four Corners, leaders of the four caucuses in Olympia, plotting the letter that we're going to send in the next day or so to the folks out in D.C. Asking for emergency assistance funding-wise. You know, but looking back to your question, Carolyn, you know, House Republicans, I think, will be continuing to focus on the three issues we've been focused on for a while. Chief among those is affordability. We continue to focus on that because that is what the people of Washington continue to say is their biggest challenge confronting them. It's just how unaffordable life in Washington has becoming, and unfortunately, the legislature has done very little to change that. You know, yeah, there's certainly federal and national things that have happened over the last 5 or 10 years. You know, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle like to blame the president for tariffs, and I'm no fan of tariffs, but the previous president had highest inflation we've ever seen since Ronald Reagan, and that didn't get a lot of attention from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. But it's not just that prices in Washington are going up over time, which they are. They're going up way faster than they are in other states. We've got something like the third highest cost of housing, fourth highest groceries, seventh highest cost of childcare, fourth highest cost of living overall. These are compared to all other states. There's a uniquely Washington problem in this that the Washington legislature needs to get serious about solving. And part of that is, I think, the real big question that you're alluding to, that Senator Gildon was alluding to, and that is the looming budget crisis that we have in Washington state. As Senator Gildon pointed out, last session the legislature raised taxes by something like $12 billion, only to find out that we're in another multi-billion-dollar shortfall. That's incredibly irresponsible to continue to find ourselves in this position year after year. When I first got elected in 2014, the state biennial budget was under $40 billion. It was like 37 or 38 billion. Our biennial budget now is over $70 billion, so that's more than a 2x increase in about 10 or 11 years. You know, I doubt most of the small businesses represented here have seen their revenue increase 2x over the past 10 years, but Washington's has. Even after you account for inflation and population growth, revenue is still growing faster than those things, yet we can't seem to keep up with how much we're spending. And that suggests another uniquely Washington structural problem that I think Republicans want to get serious about fixing, because if we don't fix the structural spending problem, the only option is to raise taxes on the people, which will continue to make Washington less affordable. I think the best summary of this comes from Commerce Director Joe Wynn, who said that in order to tax the rich, you have to have rich people left to tax. In order to protect jobs, you have to have jobs left to protect. And so, you know, Washington is a fantastic place. I went to college and then law school out of state. Both times moved back here to Auburn to work and live and grow my family. Because I know how much potential Washington has. We're not Alabama and we're not Mississippi, we're Washington. We've got among the most robust Medicaid system in the entire country in terms of what we cover and who we cover. We've got the highest average starting teacher salary of any state in the country, the most generous college financial aid package of any state in the country. We're doing all these wonderful things because companies like the Boeing company decided to call Seattle home 100 years ago. Companies like Microsoft decided to call Seattle home 50 years ago. Amazon called Seattle home 25 years ago. And if we continue to raise taxes on businesses, small or large, we risk pushing those jobs away from Boeing and Microsoft and Amazon and all of the Boeing suppliers that line this valley. We risk the next generation of founders deciding that Austin or Miami is a more attractive place to grow their business than Seattle, and we're going to lose out on the ability to create well-paying jobs, have companies like the Boeing company that can make a $500,000 donation overnight to help local flood victims, and I think that's really unfortunate. So that's what we're going to be focused on House Republicans, solving structural budget problems and making Washington more affordable.
All right, I'm going to shorten things up a bit because I know a couple of you do have to get out of here. So I think starting with Senator Orwall, and I know there's some time constraints, so if you do need to leave, go ahead. We will forgive you. I just want to talk a little bit about the increasing cost, tax, and regulations, specifically on businesses, small businesses, because the South Sound region is full of small businesses. We're a major hub and have a lot of businesses in this area. What do you think that the state could do to help small and mid-sized businesses thrive and succeed with cost increases coming from so many different areas?
Yeah, thank you for that question. My apologies for having to leave early. It is compounded now by the flooding, and I do think we need to go back and look at what we did last session. I know haven't introduced yet, but I'm working on some legislation to try to help some of our small nonprofits and other small businesses that are being impacted. I do think that the costs have gone up for everything, and one of the things you had mentioned, Representative Stokesbary, and he did have a cookie on his plate for breakfast, I was teasing him, is that we are expanded for Medicaid, and that is a state match. In fact, we have the most to lose as far as people losing their health care next year. So that is going to be a priority. People have costs increase toward their health care.
I think we need a better mic. Change mics.
People are going to see huge increases in the premiums for their health care. Everything has gone up, and I do think small businesses are our economic engine. And so I do want to hear your feedback of what we should be working on. I did meet with the chamber, working on some stuff to impact and help out the chambers. But when we look at our K-12 system, when we look at healthcare, we have to, and housing affordability, all those are stacking. And so we do need to find that relief. Again, that's why I'm here, is to see what things we can be doing. I've met with small businesses, I've toured some of the manufacturing in our area. We also have to have a pipeline, right, for these great jobs in the Kent Valley, so that the employers have access to that. So it's a lot of things. I am concerned about going into next session, but again, I think there is a commitment to putting everything on the table, hearing all voices, and seeing if we can't find that path forward.
Senator Gildon?
Thank you. I think the first thing we need to do in Olympia is do no harm, right? Let's just stop the bleeding, do no more harm. And like Representative Stokesbary said, Senate Republicans are going to be keenly focused on affordability, and not just affordability in a fiscal sense, but affordability in can we morally afford these policies? Is it affordable for our future generations, right? Because we have to invest in our children to make sure that they have, we can't afford to not invest in our children and the future of our state. So we're going to be putting every policy through a fiscal lens, no matter what it is, if it's public safety, if it's money, if it's childcare, that's where we're going to be focused. But I think some of the things that we can do, and Senate Republicans are not just going to gripe about the way things are, we're going to be part of the solution, right? And I always like to give folks some solid, concrete policies that you can sink your teeth into, and you can understand some of the structural reforms that we're going to be proposing. We're not going to be proposing cuts to services or any of that kind of stuff, but I'll just leave you with a couple of examples today of some of the common sense reforms that we're going to be proposing. And I'll start off with paid family and medical leave. So we found out recently that there is a loophole that allows state employees to collect paid family and medical leave concurrently with sick leave. So what that results in is they can collect up to about 190% of their weekly paycheck by doing that concurrently. I don't think that's the way that the policy was meant to be. I think you should take your sick leave first, and if you need additional time, you take your paid family and medical leave. And we found out that has resulted in, last year, over 300,000 hours of wages that were paid out, basically double dipping. So we're going to be proposing legislation that clarifies that you cannot do that. In the legislature, in the state Senate, we're not allowed to do that. But in the executive agencies, they are allowed to do that. So we're going to try to clean that up this year. Another one is very simple, has to do with reimbursement rates for mileage. Right now, state employees are reimbursed at the rate of 70 cents per mile. The state also has a motor pool, right, where we maintain a fleet of vehicles. The cost of running the motor pool is much less than the reimbursement rate for mileage. We need to even that out. It just makes sense. Another one is administrative bloat. Over the last number of years, in DCYF, Department of Children, Youth and Families in particular, you've seen a dramatic increase in hiring of middle managers. And while frontline worker hiring has just been stagnant. And I'm sure that you've also heard about all of the tort cases that are arising because we don't have enough frontline workers to go out and provide the care to families and children in need. So it's a double cost. So what we want to do is we want to rebalance some of those state agencies, get more frontline workers, reduce the administrative bloat, right-size the agencies so that they can provide the care necessary for the children and families that need it. Another one that I'll mention is Medicaid. We spoke about it just a little bit earlier. The state auditor about a year ago came out with a study that said there's about 350,000 people in Washington state who are concurrently enrolled in Medicaid in Washington state and in another state, meaning both states are paying the monthly premiums for that single individual. I think we need to clean that up and we'll save a lot of money. So these are just some examples of some of the policies that Senate Republicans are going to be getting behind and proposing this year that are real structural reforms, not cuts to services, and I think they're common sense things that everyone can get behind.
Thank you. Representative Stearns. I think we're sharing more mics.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a lot in front of us for sure. I think affordability is really important. That's something I see in some of the work I've been focused on, which stems from my background in working for the U.S. Department of Energy. So I am a big proponent of bringing in new forms of energy into our power structure, our load capacity, and I've focused specifically on advanced technology. So I think new energy sources do provide a way out. I mean, we've already experienced under this current administration, 12% increase in the cost of electricity. We put our foot down, I should say the country or the White House has put its foot down on renewables, which are incredibly reliable and necessary for build out of things that we actually do need. I support data centers. I support building out our electrical grid, but we need power to do that, and we can't lose that or cede that ground to China or Russia. So I am a very big fan of advanced technology. I secured funding for a feasibility study for 4 small modular nuclear reactors. I think that's a huge part of our future. I've also been supporting fusion and other forms of technology. I think those things can help lower the cost of energy because we are facing a 7 to 10 gigawatt shortage of energy right now. And that is something that I believe we can fix, but we just need to have the will to do that. I think we do. So I think you'll see some changes in the upcoming session where we will make some strides on making energy costs more affordable for everyone. I would also say that, in my work, I was just yesterday, and I'm headed out right now, to a legislative summit between tribes and leaders in the House and Senate. And we had an incredible meeting yesterday. And so one thing that I think all of us should be aware of, and you all probably see this in King County, is that tribes are becoming more and more important parts of our economy. And they are great partners to work with. And I think that they too will help us figure out some of these really intractable problems. I spent a lot of time yesterday with them on this energy issue, trying to figure out how we can solve some of the transmission problems we have. So there is a lot of room for us to work. And I'm just very optimistic about what it is that we can accomplish.
Okay, Representative Stokesbary.
Yeah, in terms of what the legislature can do to help small businesses, I think the most important thing is exactly what Senator Gildon said, and that's do no harm. I remember when I was a kid and I'd get in a little trouble and start to develop a loose relationship with the truth, and as a way to get out of trouble with my parents, they would, detect that and say, hey, stop digging the hole deeper. And I didn't really understand that metaphor all that well until I got to Olympia, and we have a really hard problem of stopping our digging while we say, hey, we're in a hole, we got to get out. But meanwhile, we just keep on digging along. So we got to stop digging the hole. One of the best examples that's most recent is the revenue package, the tax package that was passed at the end of last session. Senator Gildon mentioned that at the start of the session, everybody knew there was this big budget shortfall, and there was one senator called it a buffet of tax options. I don't think I would want to describe all the tax options as a buffet, because that sort of invites gluttony, and I say that as somebody that, as Tina pointed out, got a cookie for breakfast, and my kids aren't here, so I don't have to explain why we can't have cookies for breakfast. Anyway, there was all kinds of ideas, like a tax on jobs, a tax on the wealthy, a higher capital gains tax, real estate excise tax. One of the main tax increases that emerged was a sales tax on services. Service businesses pay B&O tax, but in Washington State, until this last year, service businesses weren't required to collect and remit sales taxes. That bill only showed up a couple of days before the end of session, so folks worried about how taxes might impact their businesses or livelihood had all session to respond to all kinds of other taxes and meet with legislators to explain, here's why the jobs tax is going to result in less jobs, and here's why the wealth tax is going to result in less wealth creation. Nobody ever had sales tax on services on their bingo card until about 5 days before the end of session. And per se, that doesn't sound the worst, and it was on things like custom software and temporary staffing services and security. And again, I don't know, maybe these security guys need to pay their fair share, and I don't know, maybe these temporary staffing agencies need to pay their fair share. What do I know? Well, you know who the biggest user of temporary staffing services in the state is? Hospitals, who hire like half of their workforce are traveling nurses. You know who one of the biggest users of custom software is? Hospitals, because they can't just go to Best Buy and buy some $59 product off the shelf that keeps our data safe. You know who one of the biggest users of security services are? Hospitals. So these ideas that only percolated the last couple days of session just decimated our hospitals, who were already struggling. Legislators need to understand that these things aren't done in a vacuum. They're not done on spreadsheets. They have real world effects, and we need to do a better job not figuring out what we can get 50 votes for on the 104th day of session, but rather what is the best economic and tax policy that is not going to harm our small businesses and going to create prosperity. Two really quick points, just moving away from the budget thing, which we spent a lot of time on, that I think are also things that will help small businesses. One is, and I appreciate Attorney General Brown alluding to this, but we've got a huge organized retail theft problem in Washington State. It is out of control. The legislature has not given local law enforcement agencies or prosecutors the tools they need to arrest and for a while chase and now charge these folks. We've got to, I appreciate the Attorney General's interest in it and his work with local jurisdictions, but what we really need to do is pass legislation that gives police and prosecutors the tools they need to get this problem under control. The other one is K-12 education. I got elected in the middle of the McCleary lawsuit, where we were under court order to spend a lot more money on education, and the legislature did that. Education for a while was over half of the state budget. But what the legislature failed to do was require any sort of accountability or results for all of that new spending. If you chart education spending with test scores over the last 10, 15 years, it looks like a giant pair of open scissors. The more money we spend, the worse the results get. And that should be inexcusable. The whole point of our state constitution saying education is the state's paramount duty isn't so that the legislature can give school districts a bigger check and pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, aren't we great? We just gave a bunch of money to schools. The actual point of that is to improve outcomes and make sure that all kids, regardless of their background, who their parents are, their zip code, are prepared for college and career, and we're failing on that. I mentioned a minute ago that we're not Mississippi because we have all kinds of robust social services, but you know what Mississippi's doing way better at us at? Teaching reading to kids. We need to get back to the basics and figure out a better way to improve educational outcomes. We're spending tons of money. It's time we demand results for all that money as well.
Okay. In the interest of time, and we don't have time for questions and answer, guys, so you'll just have to see if everybody can mingle. Just a couple last words, and then also just a yes or no, if you think that all of the recent flood activity and road collapsing around the state is going to make the transportation budget worse, because transportation is one of the reasons we're here, finishing those connecting Washington projects. So just kind of last words and then go. And so I'll let you go first, Representative Stokesbary, and then.
All right, well, thanks for having me, Carolyn, and thanks everybody for joining us this morning. I think my big closing thought will be, I hope to see you all in Olympia. I mean, it is great that the South Sound Regional Coalition puts on this event. You guys do great work. I remember when I ran for office in 2014, I felt like I was compelled to come out before the election in support of the transportation package because of all of the work mostly people in this room have done. And in fact, it kind of came back to bite me a little bit because when the transportation budget was being passed, I went to the then Chair Judy Cliburn to try to get more money for the area, and she knew that I had already sort of like been out in favor of the package, and she said, well, why do I need to give you more? You're already a yes. If you flip to a no, nobody will ever take you seriously ever again, and I don't need to give you more to get you to a yes. So, but all that's to say that the folks in this room, I think, have done tremendous effort, are a huge reason why the 2015 package passed, a huge reason why I was able to support it. So you guys do great work, but if you can come down to Olympia more and more, that can be incredibly impactful too. At the end of the day, as many disagreements as Chris and I have, and I have with Chris's colleagues, we're just regular people that want to do the best we can for the state of Washington. And Chris knows a lot about energy. I know a lot about startups, but I don't know that much about energy, and I don't know, maybe he doesn't know that much about business startups. So hearing from folks with firsthand expertise, as cliche and Schoolhouse Rocky as it sounds, is really, really important. And to answer your question, Carolyn, I am positive that the transportation budget will always be worse and harder to do than we think it is.
Okay, thanks. Representative Stearns.
Thank you again, Carolyn. I appreciate all the work you've done. And I also just wanted to recognize Casey Bray for just an incredible job here today. I love everything she does. You mentioned small business startup. I grew up around the best one ever. I think I may have mentioned this before, but my family opened up a chocolate business.
Oh, yeah.
They ran a candy store. And I mean,
Okay, I like you better now.
There could have been a lot of things they decided to open up shop with. Thank God, well, maybe my heart doesn't thank God, but my stomach thanks God for growing up around chocolate. And that was really one of the best things, I think, as a kid, but also, I just saw how my grandparents, my aunt, my uncle, and my brother, how they, struggled every day to get that chocolate store to make money, to keep their inventory up to speed. In case some of you don't know, the chocolate business is also full of secrets. No one writes down a recipe. They are guarded like the Holy Grail. So everything is passed on by oral tradition, which actually makes sense for me because my tribe's knowledge and culture is also passed down by oral tradition. So I love coming to this because I just love working with small business. I think you're right. Transportation will still always be a challenge. But we made some strides. I'm really grateful that we were able to support, the opening of the gateway off of I-5 to Gateway 2, and we're continuing to work on Gateway 1 down to Tacoma. Highway 18 is continuing to grow. So there's, we're not in this business because it's easy. We're in this business because the problems we get are hard. But we have people, my colleagues included, who have great courage, and I'm so grateful for my colleagues who have that, because it's easy to just say, wow, this is too big for me. But there's a lesson out of the Torah, and I was thinking of that because of what happened in Bondi Beach. Is that the work won't get finished today, and it won't get finished by us, but that does not relieve us of the obligation to continue to work on solving the problems. So again, I'm really glad to be here. I'm looking forward to the next session, even though I know it'll be tough, but the tough things are worth it.
Okay, Senator Gildon, wrap it up, but I do have to say we kind of have to.
All right, I'm very good at being brief whenever I need to. So Focus, affordability, as we've said, transparency. You just heard that one of the largest tax bills was brought out on April 16th, just a few days prior to session ending. As a matter of fact, it was published on April 16th, and the public hearing was also held on April 16th. That's not transparent. That doesn't give any of you time to analyze the impacts and give feedback to the legislature. We should be much more transparent. We should also be much more accountable. I think every bill that spends a taxpayer dollar, that dollar should have a name, it should have a job, and it should have measures of performance and measures of effectiveness attached to it to make sure that it is effective. And it should have a review period after, say, 10 years to see if it's actually working or not. But I want to say thank you all so much for coming out. Thank you for the work that you do, and I hope to see many of you in Olympia this next legislative session.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody. I really appreciate it. So transportation remains one of the #1 priorities for this. And of course, as I look at, the news today, and I keep thinking we are going to have to fight extra hard to make sure all of the Connecting Washington projects continue to be finished. That is a priority, to see those things to completion. Every year, we have to do the big calls to action to keep that going. I expect to see that again. Public safety. With the budget crisis the way it is, to see more money going to public safety is probably not something we're going to be seeing very often, and it will be very difficult. So I think that we're going to see some policy things to see if we can help provide prosecutors with a little more flexibility. What can we do using the AG's office? The security guard sales tax on services, that is a huge problem for a lot of businesses who rely on those security guards to try and keep their businesses safe. It's now become more expensive. So how can we deal with that? So I think we're going to be looking at a lot of those little policy things. What can we do around the edges without big money? Budget and taxes, we will be watching that very closely because of the impact. We will see bills to fix the sales tax on services bill, and there's a couple, especially dealing with nonprofits and with live presentations and things that require education. One of the things that they forgot about is a lot of your education is done by private entities because of things that the government requires. You have to have continuing education in order to keep certain licenses, and that has now become more expensive. We'll work to fix that. Supporting small businesses, we're going to be looking at permitting, we're going to be looking at making sure our employees have housing, and then of course trying to reduce or reform regulatory requirements, whatever we can do to try, and try to reduce the impact of all those different regulations on those businesses and try to narrow that down. That should be able to be done without a lot of monetary issues. And then I just want to say, definitely healthcare is an issue for us, childcare, and of course, continued investments in workforce education. That was a significant area of cuts last year. We at least want to make sure we can get through this session without any additional cuts, and hopefully bring some money back if we can. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and get to the raffle. Thank you.
And with that, on behalf of the coalition, I'd like to thank you for your attendance this morning. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Go Hawks, and be safe. We are dismissed.